with few exceptions, when a not-Jew exhibits hostilities toward a Jew or Jews as such, we call it anti-Semitism. But born Jews as well, often throughout our history, exhibited negative feelings ranging from passive hostility towards our people to even active advocacy of our extermination as people, not necessarily violent, like, for example, Karl Marx and many others. To help us understand this phenomenon of Jewish, what I call anti-Semitism or hostility toward Jewish people, we once again invited David Patterson, a professor at the University of Texas and one of the leading scholars of the Holocaust and anti-Semitism in general. David, Bruhim Habayim, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking your time to help us with our questions.
Thank you so much. It is an important issue, an important phenomenon, and it's something, as everything from the Jews. It's something that can enlighten any human being. This phenomenon of Jewish anti-Semitism.
What made me, ask you to stop by was results of the Pew Research that showed that 16% of American Jews understand and in many ways support Hamas, and 3% actually understand and support Hamas slaughter of October 7 of our people in Israel.
Yes.
I'm not talking about Americans in general. Americans in general, the percentages are higher, much higher. But 16%, 1 out of 6 that understands, basically says, yes, Hamas is doing what they need to do. To me, it's just astonishing. What do you think?
Yes, it is astonishing. There is an understandable tendency to close our eyes to evil, much to our peril, and maybe somewhat to our credit. In a way, we can't imagine the nature of this evil. We think to ourselves, there must be something we've done, or there must be a reason why they're acting this way. There must be a way to reason with them. But the few people can fathom evil. Emil Fackenheim, a great Jewish philosopher, once said that during the Holocaust, more was real than was possible. The evil was greater, exceeded possibility. And we see this with Hamas. And Hamas, of course, has direct lines of influence as well as parallels with the Nazis and their Jew hatred.
But Hamas has its roots in violence and Nazi type of ideology. But I'm asking you about the 16% of Jews that find a way to support and in some way justify the Hamas's violence.
Well, I think they buy into the discourse of anti-Zionism that is steeped in self-righteousness. It's the phenomenon of what I sometimes call the so-called good Jew. I'm a good Jew. I'm not like those others. I am morally outraged by Israel, the Zionist entity, where, anti-Zionism is an opposition not to Netanyahu, but to the existence of the Jewish state, right? And it always comes with the discourse of you know, colonialism, apartheid, racism, violation of human rights, genocide, all of the whatever the going evil of the day might be. So if you want to be regarded as a good person and a good Jew, you have to be on board with this discourse of moral outrage,
Mm,
which in fact is a discourse of exterminationist hatred in the end. In the end, that's where it goes logically.
absolutely. That's the way I see it. But
Yeah.
let me ask you a few questions, because I'd like to understand the difference between Jewish anti-Semitism and Jewish critique of Jewish people. In your books, you mention Bernard Lazar, for example.
Yes.
He was the first Dreyfusard. I mean, one of the first Dreyfusard, giving his life in defense of Jewish people, not only in France but also in Romania and other places. And at the same time, uh, although initially he became a friend of Theodor Herzl, later on, they parted ways because he could not stomach the idea of Jewish nation, of Jewish state.
Yes. No, Bernard Lazar is an important case. He's pivotal in this history, certainly for the modern period. Bernard Lazar wrote the first systematic study of anti-Semitism. It's published in 1894 during the Dreyfus Affair, in which he argues that the Jews bring this hatred on themselves by being so backward and so different. It's what some call the Talmud Judah, the Talmud Jew. Their separatism, not associating with the general society, not assimilating. So the one of the things that happened with the Dreyfus Affair is that it put an end to hopes that assimilation could work, certainly for Herzl. Herzl said the Jews will never be
But
safe.
David, my feeling is that there are some Jews that distance themselves from Jewish people because they're just afraid of reaction of society around them. And
Sure.
he was not one of those Jews.
No, but he was a modern, rational, enlightened Jew, um, out of the
So his hostility toward Jewish people came from his Marxism, from his socialism. What was?
yes, yes. I mean, all of the leading socialists and communists, Marx, Engels, Toussaint, Fourier, Proudhon, they're all anti-Semites, right?
Not so much Engels. Not so much Engels.
Okay, I'll give you Engels.
1891 article, on socialism of fools, of idiots. That was Engels.
Yeah, yes, yes.
So non-Jew, he had better feelings about Jews than his Jewish friend Karl Marx. In fact, in that article, I mean, Marx was dead, but in that article, Engels actually hits Marx over the head. He calls him a Jew. Can you believe it? All his life, Marx tried to avoid being a Jew.
Yeah,
And then his best friend in that article calls him a Jew as an example for all others that socialists cannot be anti-Semite because the founder of socialism is a Jew.
right. Yes, but the principles of socialism are antithetical to the principles of Judaism. In other words, I mean, dialectical materialism is antithetical to revealed Torah, right? Revelation, revealed commandments. Um, one of the movements into modernity for the Jew, it has to be a movement away from Torah, away from the commanding voice of God, and into a position of autonomy, as as the German idealists define autonomy, being self-legislating in the light of reason, in the light of moral principles that come from within oneself. So many Jews are buying into this. Many Jews hide from the commanding voice of God, like Adam hid when God says, "Where are you?" Well, God asked Cain, "Where's your brother? What have you done?" In other words, it, Jews, like any human being, flee from a reckoning. They flee from responsibility, from being chosen for a task. Uh,
David, so until 1989, I was one of those Jews, huh?
well, then you understand.
Well, not really, because I was not running away from anything. I just did not know what Jews were. Actually, maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. I remember when my mother and father were speaking Yiddish, so I would not understand. I had a feeling, why are they speaking that backward language? They should speak Russian, the language of the future.
Well, language is a very important part of this phenomenon.
Well, but I'm
Language,
just saying my attitude toward Jews. I mean, in fact, the first time I really thought about Jews was when I was 15 years old, and I came out during the class break, and there's Natasha Silova. You see, I remember the names of speaking to Asa Cheskaya and Angela Brint, two Jewish girls. She was explaining to them who was Jesus, that he was a great Russian hero of old. And I was thinking, well, sounds plausible. And then she tells him, Jews actually come from Italy. And I was thinking, yeah, we sort of do look a little bit like Italians. And I lived in a neighborhood which had a lot of Jewish people. After the war, they coalesced back in that neighborhood in Vinica, and but I did not know anything about Jews and did not know anything about holidays. And if you would tell me about God, I'd just tell you, I do not know what you're talking about.
yes. Um, well, certainly in Soviet
But
Union,
I was not really anti-Jewish. When I heard kike, Zid, in my direction or in anybody's direction, when an older woman was crawling on a tram, and she was called Zhidovka, I fought. I attacked physically with fists. That
mm,
was the only way I knew how to react, and I did react it. So in that respect, maybe it was Bernard Lazare who also, was defending Jews while staying away from Jewish tradition.
he's defending Look, Lazar is not exact. He's not attacking. He's defending. He thinks he has the best interest of the Jews at heart. He wants the Jews to modernize, to be civilized, sophisticated, educated, and move forward and leave off with these backward traditions, superstitions that draw the outrage of non-Jews.
But many, many Jews of Europe and of Russia, in many ways, of that period, had that attitude that Judaism is
Yeah,
passe.
yeah, absolutely. Most of the early Zionists had this attitude, right? Most of them. Uh, the Judaism is passe. But look, if Judaism is passe, then God is passe. The nation default.
Without any doubt. But that's what Nietzsche and people like him wanted. That's what Marx
Yes,
wanted.
yes. And how did that work out?
Well, they did not see the results.
Yes, but the Jew hatred is
Mhm.
God hatred. Jewish hatred of other Jews is hatred of the God, of the commanding God of Abraham, of Mount Sinai, of Moses, the God who is again asking us, "Where are you? Where's your brother? What have you done?" I don't want to hear the question. I want to be my own master of my own fate. Right? Understandable.
Hmm. From Lazar, let's move a little bit to a different type of a Jew. The Jew who has never done anything good for Jewish people, period. And his name is Noam Chomsky. Can you tell us something about it?
Well, Noam Chomsky is the perfect example of the intellectual Jew who uh, who wants to be known as anything but a Jew. So he attacks Jews. You know, he wrote the introduction to a Holocaust denial book called "The Problem of the Gas Chambers" by Robert Faurisson, French guy. Chomsky accuses Israelis of being involved in kind of a world plot to control, to influence. It's out of the protocols of the elders of Zion.
Hmm.
Uh, so he's
I have to say, I've listened to his YouTube answers and interviews and presentations and everything else. And in the beginning, he looks like an intelligent person. I mean, he talks, reasonably and this and that. But then you start noticing that the guy, he has absolutely no idea of the world. He has absolutely no idea of history or does not want to know the history and
right.
does not have any idea about the future. When he talks about himself that he is an anarchist, and then he elaborates on this anarchy, this is really, really funny, you know. But
Yes.
but you mentioned that he wrote the introduction. I did not read that book about this Holocaust denial, and then he goes on and say that Israel is like Nazis, you know,
Yes.
and so if Nazis did not kill 6 million Jews, what's wrong with Israel killing some Arabs?
Well, look, the term Nazi is calculated to incite hatred. It's not intended to actually describe or analyze anything or explain anything, or to inform. It's to incite.
And his father, unlike my parents were Jewish, and as I said, they spoke Yiddish and communicated, but they did not know anything about being a Jew. My mother did not want me anything to know about Jews, uh, and I just know it by one example. But his father, Chomsky's father, was a great Hebrew scholar. He
Well, I
wrote
think, yeah,
he wrote interesting, very good book on Hebrew.
that's I wasn't aware of that. That's very striking. Well, the Marx's grandfather was a rabbi, right?
Grandfather, but his father, became Lutheran, and converted little boy at 5 years of age.
Yes. Well, this tells us the importance of an ongoing education, teaching, learning about who we are, where we're from.
But but,
You
but
know,
mhm.
it's it's uh, it's always been a great source of frustration to me, to see Jews who don't realize the depth and the beauty of their inheritance from the tradition of Torah, Talmud, the sages, Midrash, the whole thing. They turn everywhere except where they're standing, except right in front of themselves for some sense of meaning and direction. And look at what they trade the Torah for. without knowing what they're trading. They're always overcharged. I mean, are you going to trade Torah for wokeism, critical race theory,
Yeah, but
anti-Zionism?
you need to know Torah first. And also,
Yeah,
besides knowing Torah, you need to be able to put it in the context of your life. I mean, there's some Jews, that live in clusters of very close societies uh, whose life revolves around synagogue, you know. But vast majority of Jews in the United States and even in Israel too do not live that way. I, for example, I don't live that way, but I still am a Jew.
well, yeah, of course. I mean, you're stuck with it.
Well, it's not simply I'm stuck with
But
it. You have to say, for me, it was a conscious decision to emphasize it after 1989 when I led
mhm,
1,500 Soviet Jews that were stopped by the United States from finding refuge in the United States on the March of Protest in front of American Embassy in Rome.
wow, good for you.
Well,
Kol
I don't know
hakavod.
if good for me or not, but then I became, a volunteer in the IDF, during the war in
Hmm.
Persian Gulf, and then I became, uh, Torah scholar, got University of Chicago, and things like this. But so, as they say, who said it? Adonai Roi. Uh, God is my shepherd, So a person does not know what he chooses, what he selects, the
Yeah,
impact of one or another of his moves, So, but there's many Jews, like for example, in Vienna, you write.
yeah.
Tell us about, this anti-Semitism of Jews in Vienna, or it's no different than of Lazar's.
Well, it's similar, I think. Vienna is one of the centers of enlightened thinking. It's the capital of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. It's the center of learning. It's the home of Freud, right? Freud is a perfect example uh, of a Jew who has contempt for Jewish teaching and Jewish tradition. A Jew who buys into the uh, the anti-Semitic canards that come out of the German Enlightenment. Uh, Freud is, rational, although Freud was a critic of the German idealism, at least. But Freud is scientific. I mean, one of the, I think, damaging moves that contributes to this Jewish contempt for Jews is Die Wissenschaft des Judentums, the scientific study of Judaism. As soon as Judaism, Jewish tradition becomes the object of scientific study, it gets de-Judaized. It's just a human phenomenon and makes no demand on the Jews or anyone else. It's the infinite responsibility that the Jews want to escape, I think. The Jews who turn away, like anyone else. Um,
But
the,
there, you see, this is Jews that leave our people following a particular ideology or worldview. But there's also Jews that do things that harm our people because of their politics or their position in society. I mean,
yes, I think this when a Jew expresses contempt for another Jew, uh, it's suicidal in a way. It's a self-contempt. It's a projection of self-contempt, I think. Uh, it's a hatred It's like Cain and Abel. You know, Elie Wiesel once said, "We hate what resembles us." Uh, Cain kills Cain in killing when he's killing Abel. It's a self-destruction. Uh, you know, perhaps you know Andre Neyer, the French Jewish scholar who wrote a book called "They Made Their Soul Anew" about Jews who returned to Judaism, about Balei Tshuva, so called. And he speaks of Judaicides, the Jewish suicide of the soul. Um, it's a self-destruction. It's it's not just self-hatred, but it's hatred of other Jews that is expressive of a certain self-contempt or shame somehow. I mean, think of the Jews who say, "Yes, I'm Jewish, but not too Jewish. I'm not one of those. I don't I don't have payas. I don't go to synagogue. I vote Democrat." Look at all the Jews who vote Democrat, wanting to be good,
80%.
wanting to be good Jews, good people. Um, they want to, but this desire to be a good person, to be pure, runs deep, and it leads Jews, especially on the intellectual left, to engage in all kinds of uh, hate speech.
Mhm. I have to say, I do not want to confuse it with those 80% Democrats, those 16% that understand Hamas, because there's many reasons why Jews vote Democrats. I mean, there's a
Yes,
long history of
yes,
right-wing Republican anti-Semitism, that moved Jews to the left. Now,
yes,
uh, but among those 80% that vote Democratic, there's 1 out of 6 that understand Hamas. That is, and we're not talking about philosophers, we're not talking about people, we're talking about just people that do not want to, the way I see it, do not want to lose their relationship with their friends and neighbors the way they had until October 7th.
yes, um, yes. The in academia where I live, the peer pressure is tremendous, and it's not just peer pressure exactly; it's professional pressure. In other words, especially with the young professors who don't have tenure, they're trying to make it through the system. Uh, they have to be very careful about expressing any support for the state of Israel. I personally know some who've lost jobs for that, over that. Um, the anti-Zionism, which is the most fashionable form of anti-Semitism, is rampant among Jewish intellectuals and academia, all of whom are Democrats. It doesn't. Look, I'm not saying Jews are a Democrat or anti-Semitic. I'm not. That is absolutely not the case. And as you say, there's a history there. There's always a history you have to contend with. But I mention in one of my writings the example of more than 400 Jews in Jewish studies programs around the nation who, in the summer of 2020, signed a statement condemning Israel as an apartheid state guilty of crimes against humanity. Now, this was the language. And this was over what they perceived to be the Israeli plan in summer of 2020 to annex the West Bank. They're going to take over. Of course, that it never happened, and it was never even intended. But
I had big arguments with a number of those people on that list that you mentioned.
I have had arguments with them myself. I know many of them personally. I mean, I'm in that world. But and I say, why do you have to use this language? Again, language is crucial. I mean, you can object to the decisions of the Israeli government without using the language of crimes against humanity and apartheid state. Israel is obviously not an apartheid state by any definition. And if you want to call it an apartheid state, you have to make a move like Amnesty International and change the definition of apartheid, just so you can tag Israel with that.
Especially Israel. In the case of human rights organizations is a separate conversation altogether. But
exactly, human rights organizations, women's organizations, gender studies groups. I saw a statement with the endorsement of 130 women's studies and gender studies academic programs supporting Hamas, supporting Palestine, saying the Palestinian cause is the feminist cause. Okay. And you can be sure there are many Jews among those women. As all, so except when they want to go on the women's march, and then the Sarsour tells them Jewish women are not welcome in the women's march. And you can see how this throws them a curve. But it's why are they in the women's march? They know there are many people like Linda Sarsour, anti-Semites, anti-Zionists. They want to show we are good people. We are good Jews. We're among the righteous. We're among the redeemed. So anti-Semitism often has this redemptive dimension, that it's for the sake of the soul, it's for the sake of your moral integrity, it's for the sake of appearing to be reasonable and righteous. People want to be considered as good.
so so they want to be considered by others to be good. I mean,
Yes.
and this is always the case, These people come out, born Jews come out against major interests of the Jews, always libeling the Jews in any way that is acceptable in that society at that particular time,
Yes. In the eyes of others.
in the eyes of others.
Yes. There's the story in the Talmud about Yochanan ben Zakkai, one of the great sages of the first century, who, when he was dying, his students gathered around him for his last blessing, and he said, "May you fear God more than you fear men." And they said, "Oh, well, of course we do. Of course we do." And he looked at him and said, "Are you sure you do? Do you fear God more than you fear men?" And look at how many of us fear the opinions of other humans more than God. It's as if we think God isn't looking. God doesn't notice. We
Well,
want
I
to
would have
be,
loved to ask Yohanan ben Zakkai a question. If you feared God more than human, why did you lean before the Jewish killer, the Roman killer of Jews, and bowed
well,
him?
Vespasian. He hailed Vespasian as emperor, right? When
Yeah,
they
yeah,
snuck him out of the city
in a coffin.
in a coffin. Yes. Uh, well, Vespasian gave him permission to build a school in Yavne.
I understand that that was his decisions, but my thing is that my question is, if you are so God fearing, why were you afraid to die in Jerusalem with 600,000
Well,
other people?
maybe that's why, as he lay dying, he was terrified of standing before God. That's
That's
part of the story. That's
I
part of the
wanted to
story.
ask him. But in any
He
case, that
he
is
was
not.
afraid.
He's not going to answer to me in any time soon, But maybe somebody will.
Yes, but this goes back to Egypt and Israelites in Egypt. You know, we have a tradition that says 80% of the Israelites stayed in Egypt. They were buying into the Egyptian dream, and they what frustrated them was not so much the hard work.
70% of Jews of Spain converted. Two-thirds
Okay,
converted. So
yeah,
same thing, it happens all the time.
yes, and I it's this is a kind of conversion. This wanting to be viewed as a good person by the anti-Zionists and the anti-Semites,
Mhm.
right? It's a kind of conversion. The anti-Semitism has certain features of a religion. It's a false religion, but it promises uh, purity. It promises a certain kind of salvation, whether it's creating an earthly utopia or getting into the Christian heaven or whatever. If you can, converting to Christianity, like so many did, as you just pointed out.
By the way, once we're getting, to this philosophy and everything, which you're an expert, but I have to say, when I look at this Bernard Lazare and his answer, his book on anti-Semitism, and his answer that we the Jews are at fault for others hating us, I have to say that I do agree with him, not for the reasons that he gave, because he
Right.
outlined the reasons, the just observable mode of behavior and way of living as something that grates on the non-Jews
Mhm.
and makes Jews hate. But I would have to say that I would go much deeper. The very foundation of our people, the acceptance of one God,
Mhm.
in fact, is the declaration to the whole world that they worship idols, they worship nothing.
That is exactly right. I couldn't agree more. Uh, that Abraham
And that produces
was
hatred of people that say, or by their very existence, insist on the view like that.
it's by their very presence in the world.
Yeah,
You're exactly right. It doesn't matter whether this Jew or that Jew actually believes it.
it really makes no difference whether
The,
you observe or don't observe.
it's the presence of the Jews in the world attests to this millennial tradition of
No
of
Jews, no God, period.
yes, yes. Jew hatred is God hatred.
Yeah, Saint
The
Augustine understood it, even Muhammad understood it.
yes,
But his followers and many followers of Saint Augustine forget it and don't want to think about it.
no, they want to be like God. They want to usurp the divine throne of judgment so that they are the ones who determine who is damned and who is saved.
Right, but in
Uh,
fact, that they're getting to sit not on the divine throne of judgment, as you say, but on the satanic throne.
yes, yes. It's they are seduced by the first temptation from the serpent. You will be like God.
Mhm.
Okay. Not just knowing good and evil, but determining good and evil. That is the temptation of modernity. Modern thought, at least in the West, if not globally, modern thought, the history of modern thought is the history of thinking God out of the picture. And when God becomes superfluous, the Jews become superfluous, or the other way around. When the Jews become superfluous, God becomes superfluous.
David, you're presenting us with a very, very, very difficult choice because, on the one hand, when the Europeans got rid of God from major role in public life, the life of Jews became somewhat better. We got some rights, in France and others.
Well,
Until then, when the religion, when Christianity or Islam ruled the society, In many places, the life for Jews was not good at all, to say the least.
Okay, good point. But you remember Clermont-Tonnerre's remark, French Revolution, 1789, to the Jews, everything as an individual, human rights, right? But nothing as a people. In other words, leave your, get rid of your Judaism, and you can have a seat at the table.
Yeah, but that was the major position of the entire French Revolution, because if
Yes,
France was divided, there was no France. In fact, revolution created France.
true. Yeah, yeah. Um, but the same thing is,
And it created France by denying so-called communitarianism, that is, the variety of communities associating within the nation, within the state.
well, that's in France. I mean, it has its own specific context in that regard. But you see the phenomenon across certainly Western Europe, uh, and in the Austro-Hungarian Empire as well. As the Enlightenment spreads, the doors start to open for the Jews, or they seem to.
Not necessarily in a good direction, but
uh, and then I mean Heinrich Heine is a perfect example of the Jew who tried to fit in, who got baptized, did everything right. But the remark from Disraeli, Queen Victoria's prime minister, who was Jewish, he once said, a kike is a Jewish gentleman who has just left the room. In other,
that's good.
but I mean, you get the point, right? You you see,
Kaik is a Jewish gentleman who just left the room.
yes,
Very good.
it's polite society.
Yes.
But also with the modern period, you have the advent of race theory, which essentializes so-called races. We know Jews are not a race, but the
In
race-based
fact,
theory,
it really, really, really blows my mind. Those people that support the CRT, supposedly they're progressive and good. And for them, Jews is the center point of their hatred. But my question
yes,
to them is, look, as a black guy, can you become a Jew? Yes. Can a Jew become a black guy? No.
so where's the tolerance and intolerance?
Who is tolerating? And they're talking about, the apartheid, the Arabs in Israel, in the land of Israel, a horrible, suppressed, oppressed, and everything. Really?
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. How many Arabs live among Jews? 2 million, you say, or more? Hmm. How many Jews live among Arabs?
Yeah,
Maybe one, Amir Khas, Gideon, whatever,
well,
Levy, and a few others visit to
and
live. If
yeah,
they would live there, they'd be all slaughtered.
they can't live. Well, they were forced out after the War of Independence, about 850,000 from the Arab countries.
But I'm talking about among the Arabs of Judea and Samaria and Gaza. How many Jews live there? In 2005, Sharon, I'm sorry, a little pig, removed 3 generations of Jews, 10,000 Jews, deported, ethnically cleansed Gaza from Jews.
Yeah.
No
And
problem.
how did that work out?
Yeah. And now Biden also wants to do the same, follow the same line, and he's also, and right next to him stands the schmucker. What's his name? Oh, Schumer. I'm sorry.
Well, and there's the whole crew, Adam Schiff, Blinken, there's this whole,
Yeah, all Jews around him, and this is the type of Jews that I mean. They're not necessarily anti-Semitic Jews. They're not. but they're Jews that don't like to lose their jobs because of things, that happen to Jews.
Yes, and they end up aiding and abetting people, either directly or indirectly, who would exterminate the Jews
Yeah.
and kill them in a minute, right?
Yeah,
So,
if they would be there, they may think that they would not be killed, and maybe they're in position to fly somewhere, and which is fine. I mean, but God forbid the the processes that are taking place in the United States now are going to go far enough. God forbid, there could be civil war, and within that civil war, the 6 million Jews in the United States would be slaughtered.
well, Jews have never fared well when caught in the middle of any civil war anywhere.
Nowhere.
But here's I think one at least one key. Um, what does it mean to be chosen? In Jewish tradition, being chosen does not mean being elect or privileged. It means being assigned, given an assignment to be a witness. And part of the testimony is to say to the world, every human is chosen for a task that no other human can perform and for a responsibility. And as we've touched
Chosen
on,
for the most dangerous way of living as a human being.
yes, exactly. It's scary. I don't want to be called out into the open like this to bear witness when it might get me killed, if not fired,
Yeah. I
if
mean,
not fired.
all those people that claimed that they were Jews circumcised in the hearts rather than in penis, they did not declare themselves Jews when millions of Jews were sent to crematorium.
Yeah, they were afraid. You
They
can, I mean,
did not even think about it. We're not. I mean, forget the St. Paul, forget everybody else. And the same thing with these Muslims. But we're talking about the born Jews, that is, Jews that are considered to be born. 15% understand Hamas. Can you believe it? 16%, according. And 3% support October 7, what they did.
well, yes. But in a way, to understand them justifies them.
Hmm. This is what United Nations followed. The whole world now is
Oh,
against Jews again.
again, they yes, the United Nations is itself an anti-Semitic organization.
But they
I would,
reflect the attitude of the entire world.
I think they accurately reflect the attitude.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the problem. Um, I mean, Israel, the state of Israel is to the nations what the individual Jew is to society. Is the target of hatred, contempt, because of the light and the testimony and the teaching that anyone Jewish or the Jewish state, what they represent by their presence.
Hmm.
That Israel is the holy land.
Absolutely. You see, that's why you just criticize Theodore Herzl and all the early Zionists. They thought that they were creating a nation like all others.
They were mistaken.
Very much so.
But what is an anti-Zionist anti? I mean, what is Zion exactly? I mean, you know what we say when we bring the Torah scrolls out of the ark, Ki mitzion tetzei Torah, right?
Mm.
The prophet Micah, the
Yeah.
Torah, the Torah goes forth from Zion, and the word of God from Jerusalem. That's what the anti-Zionist is anti. And that's what makes the anti-Zionism anti-Semitism.
Anti-Zionist, the way I see it, is anti-God, period. That's number one. And number two, anti-Zionist is the friend of the evil in this world.
Yes, yes. Um, you know, it's the premise of the anti-Semite. It's not that all Jews are evil, but all evil is Jewish.
Absolutely.
All evil stems from the Jewish people. So, for the sake of humanity,
What was it?
for,
One of the founders of Black Lives Matter said that this is her biggest, not her, but their biggest problem is Israel. No
yes,
other problem. The biggest problem is this. Can you believe it?
yes, Israel is the source of all evil, including American police brutality.
Mhm.
Israel's the source.
Yes.
COVID, whatever the evil might be, Israel is the source. But it turns out it's the other way around. As usual, there's an inversion. It's not that the source of all evil is the Jews. The source of all evil is anti-Semitism. I would say it's hatred of God,
Uh, uh,
getting rid of
hatred of
God.
God is for sure. And I have to say, people that attack Israel and indirectly or directly attack Jews, they forget what is the foundation of relationship between Jews and the rest of the world. I mean, Jews as people were brought about, were created in order for every family, every nation in the world to find its blessing or a
Yes,
curse if
or
they
the curse.
badmouth us.
Yes, and I think what is perhaps one thing anyway that's extremely disturbing in the Torah for many of us is the insistence that we treat not just our own neighbor, but the stranger with loving kindness. I mean, love your neighbor as yourself is followed in Leviticus 19:18 is followed just a few verses later with the same words, love the stranger as yourself. And it's repeated, care for the stranger, be considerate, and so on, 36
Same
times.
law is going to be for you and for Gerim, for Ger among you.
Yes,
Number one. And number two,
repeat. Yeah,
where else, anywhere there's a document which says if a slave runs away from a neighboring country, give him asylum and let him live anywhere within your borders.
yeah. Well, it's counterintuitive.
That's
We
Zionism.
It's yes, and we look. It's easy. I don't know if it's easy, but it's maybe easier to love your neighbor who is
And the
of
house of prayers for all nations. Where else it is? In the story of Muhammad, where? Only in Hebrew Bible.
yeah. Well, anyone. It's only since 1967 with the reunification of Jerusalem that anyone who comes in peace is free to pray in Jerusalem.
I'm sorry, unless he is a Jew. Unless he is a Jew.
Well,
The whole Al Aqsa massacre that they have staged and the whole war they're conducting to exterminate Jewish people from that land.
yeah. Well, it's another inversion. Who is free to pray in Mecca?
Not
Only
Jew, not
Muslims.
Jews, not
Not only
Christians.
only Muslims, and women only if they're accompanied by an immediate male family member. You
And African blacks only if
know,
they go to a side and not show themselves too much.
oh, that I didn't know.
Muslim blacks from
Yeah.
Africa have problem praying in Mecca too.
Wow.
They do come there, are allowed, but they have to stand and behave.
I did not know. But in any case, you see the difference between the holy cities of Jerusalem and Mecca. Uh, and well, when there was a temple in Jerusalem, non-Jews could go up to the Temple Mount. There was a court for the Gentiles, so called.
Yeah, but they could not go further. But what
Well,
I'm talking about is that on the third try, we are moving, as far as I'm concerned, we're moving to a house of prayer of all nations, not simply of Jews.
yes. And well, during Sukkot, we pray for all the nations. We used to bring sacrifices for all the nations.
I understand, but those nations do not come to Sukkot and pray for us. But what I'm saying is that
Mhm.
the future, the way I see it, you may not see it that way, other Jews may not see it that way, but the way I see it, I see that Temple Mount, Al-Aqsa, where it's now standing,
Mhm.
is going to be replaced by the house of prayer of all nations.
Yes, that's our teaching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I support it. This is what it's all about. In any case, David, thank you once again for stopping by and for sharing your expertise and your thoughts. I appreciate it very much. And I hope to talk to you again if you don't mind.
Thank you.
We've
Yes,
covered so many aspects of Jewish life.
we have lots more to talk about.
And once again,
Thank
huh?
thank you. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you. And as they say in China, maybe they don't, sei gesund.
And you too. All blessings to you and your family. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.